Dom thinks he's being smart. He's like, Elliotte, you dummy. He sends me a text. Elliotte, you dummy. That's just your father-in-law. No, it's not. He's married to my wife's sister, so it's not my father-in-law.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
This segment is already off the rails.
Ancestry.ca.
That's right. 23andMe. We've dropped your DNA all over the internet.
Welcome once again to 32 Thoughts, the podcast presented by the GMC Sierra AT4X. Elliotte, Kyle, Dom back with you. Elliotte, we begin with a pop quiz. What does Nico Hischier and Ilya Kovalchuk have in common?
They are both European.
Yes, they are. Not the answer we were looking for, but you are not incorrect.
Okay, what are you going with here?
Well, of course, both were also first overall picks, and both were taken first overall on this very day, June the 23rd. 8 years ago for Nico Hischier, 24 years ago for Kovalchuk. Of course, this year's draft is not today. It's on Friday in LA. You'll be there for it. A potential first overall pick this year, Matthew Schaefer, is going to join us a little later on in the pod today, so that's something to look forward to. All of this to say, it's a big week around the league. The draft is one thing, and a lot of teams are sorting out their own business with the players they already have in-house, as we are 2 Tuesdays away from July the 1st. So why don't we run through some of the biggest stories, and we begin with Mitch Marner.
Hold on. The biggest story, first of all, the biggest story, how's Dana feeling?
She's good. She's good. The heat this weekend in southern and eastern Ontario hasn't helped, but we're at the point now, as I was saying to Dawn before we started recording, when we get up in the morning, I say, "How are you feeling?" And she responds, "Still pregnant."
I remember, so Max was born in October, and Steph told me the biggest mistake she made was having the timing that she was pregnant during the summer. So let me just say, like, Dana is ahead of the game. I'm glad she's feeling okay. So yeah, let's go through the storylines, because this is a big week. I think this is the week where I think, when it comes to some players that teams still have rights to, I think the teams are like, okay, we got to know what's happening here. We need a clear answer.
Right. So why don't we begin with Mitch Marner right now, still under contract with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yep.
What's the next step there?
Well, so we talked a week ago on this podcast about how the word was that Marner is thinking of setting up meetings around July 1st and then making a visit or two. As I wrote this week and talked about last week on the pod, I had a few people say to me, it's a great idea in theory, but in practice, teams are going to want to know that. I want to know fast if he's coming, because I've got to enact my plan B if he isn't. I just think there's a lot of people who are, when the time comes, they want to see what Vegas offers. Like when you start to sit down, this is the week you sit down and start figuring out, okay, who do I think is going where? Who's going here? Who's going there? And I think there's a lot of people just wondering about, is Vegas the team to beat here?
But is the idea, and we talked about it a few pods ago, and similar to McDavid and Edmonton, though the situations are a little different, but short term with Mitch Marner, is that becoming more and more of a realistic option for him?
I don't know. Again, it was a couple weeks ago, I think we mentioned the rumors of a 4-year deal. I had some people say to me that's not going to happen. I had some other people say to me it could happen. There were some other reports, I guess, on the weekend that it could be a 2 or 3 year deal. One of the things that's very obvious here between the teams and the agents is now that the cap is going up, but we only know the total for 3 years. I think everybody's trying to figure out what all of this means, right? And what the next contracts are going to look like. So I don't have a great answer on that. I just think that a lot of different options are on the table. But if you ask most people about Marner and where they think, a lot of people are kind of like, they think, rightly or wrongly, they think that Vegas is the team to beat.
Okay, of all the conversations you've had over the last few days, any part of those made you feel any different about, I guess, the unlikelihood that Marner remains in Toronto?
I don't think so. I would be surprised. I think they would be surprised too. I would be surprised.
Okay. The other big UFA for the Leafs, John Tavares. Sounds like they've been apart and kind of where the expectation is at. You mentioned the Brock Nelson comparable, the 3-year deal he got in Colorado. How do you think that one ends up?
See, this is the danger of this week. Like I'm not like the one thing again I have no interest in taking a shot at other people's reporting, because as I wrote on Saturday, this is the time of year where there's so much information. It's like trying to drink out of a full bore fire hose, right? Like, it's crazy. And I think the thing is that it's very important is that, especially with things like negotiations, like, you've got a team trying to get Tavares to the best deal they can get, and you've got an agent trying to get Tavares to the best deal they can get, and there's going to be ups and downs, and there's going to be moments where it looks close, and there's going to be moments where it looks like it's not going to happen. This is the week where it's like, bleep or get off the pot, right? So I think we'll find out this week, obviously, how serious everybody is. The word that I've heard here is that Toronto is trying to be creative. Like, Toronto doesn't want to give Tavares, like, I think Tavares could get the Brock Nelson deal on the open market. I think it's possible. And I just don't think Toronto wants to do that. Do I think Tavares wants to stay in Toronto? 1,000,000,000%. Do I think Toronto would like to keep Tavares and maybe knows that he wants to stay and they're trying to use that leverage a little bit? Absolutely. The word I've heard is creative. Now, it wouldn't surprise me here if Toronto's trying to defer money too. I don't know that for sure, but I think it's possible. And this could be the last year you're allowed to defer money. I think from what's seeping out of the CBA, there's a chance that all of this, the deferred money could go away. But I've heard that Toronto's trying to be creative, and right now Tavares isn't biting on what they're doing. But again, like, this time of year, things change fast. All it takes is one phone call. And again, this is last week you can still posture a bit. This week we find out what's real. And, I always remember last year, Reinhart and Florida, which was such an incredibly happy marriage, they got that one done right by the deadline, right? Like, right there. So there's always time. And I don't want to make any proclamations, except that I know Toronto's trying to be quote unquote creative. And so far, Tavares hasn't bit on what that is.
Right, and I can see it because you can understand, okay, Tavares is older now. He wants to be in Toronto, that idea of taking a little less to play in his hometown. And I think the leverage from the player's side is, if Tavares isn't there, who's their second-line center? Like, it can get thin very, very quick there. Of course, not knowing what else they do come July 1. But there's a real need at this point still to have somebody of Tavares' experience and capabilities in that lineup, don't you?